the last thing that I want to do is summarize. Some people weren't able to come to the meeting, but they did send in comments, and so I'm going to try and summarize briefly some of the comments that were sent in, and I'm just going to try and reduce it to the main research questions, because I think a lot of the things that people talked about in the documents that they sent to me has been contained already in comments that we've made. Ben Bradshaw, University of Guelph, of course, sent in sort of a description of discussion on IDAs. And we've talked about that a little bit, but he points out the importance of understanding how these things came along, how they vary, why they vary, the impacts that these IDAs have, and alternatives to IDAs. Pardon me? Oh, for the, yeah, it's a Canadian phenomenon, I guess. It's impact benefit agreements. Sorry.
But are signed between Inuit organization and private companies.
Impact benefit agreements is something that Canadian and Northern social science researchers know. Gérald Duham from the University of Laval talks about the importance of what we've mentioned already, this notion of sustainability, you know, and that notion, what does that mean in the North? And he's very interested in this in terms of the Plan Nord, which we've already talked about, is that he thinks that ReSDA can help sort of looking at the notion of sustainability, the social dynamics of sustainable development around the ideas that were expressed in Plan Nord, sort of a critical analysis of those notions in the Plan Nord. Q Young has talked about the importance of using whatever available information exists, data, to measure the impacts of resource development on the health of communities, and from the point of view of the health as a community aspect. And so that's another thing that's something that he thinks ReSDA can become involved in. Then there's something that we didn't talk about before, but I'm sure many of you have heard of this through the conversations, is the Arctic Social Indicators project has become involved in ReSDA. We had a workshop here in September with the Inuvialuit Regional Corporation to talk, and Jennifer did the presentation of the Inuvialuit statistical project, and that what this group has decided is that they would like ReSDA to sort of coordinate an analysis of a more practical application of these indicators for varying regions, and also the use of alternative indicators, qualitative indicators, etc., and a whole range of discussions around the notion of measurement indicators to measure impacts. And so that Joan Nyman-Larsen, Gail Fondal, Peter Schweitzer, Beria Popol, this is something that they hope to work with ReSDA on. Matt Berman from the University of Alaska Anchorage has a whole idea of what we should be doing. He couldn't be here because it's Thanksgiving, of course. He echoes, I think, some of the points that Lee made about the importance of understanding institutions, how the institutions vary. I can't get scrolled down to see. I think I'm going to read what he said. Oh, he says one of the questions is, how can one determine if the goal of increasing benefits to northern communities has been achieved? This is a question that ReSDA has answered. He says this is both a question of indicators and data to measure benefits received at the community level, and a question of how to ascertain cause and effects, that is to determine the roles of the policies and practices in raising the level of benefits. These are challenging research issues. Comparative case studies that examine resource development outcomes under different institutional regimes could play a critical role in ReSDA research. Such case studies are only useful, however, if there are agreed upon social indicators that can be compared at the community level, and that there is some credible methodology for tying the different outcomes to the institutional differences rather than to some case-specific drivers. So that's Matt Berman. Larissa Ryabova from the Kola Science Institute, Science Center. is very much interested in ReSDA becoming involved in the question of resource rent distribution in the Russian far north, and how that varies from a North American and European perspective, and how that the way that it's redistributed to meet the needs of the regions and the local communities in the Russian far north compared to other regions. So that's what she's interested in working on. Olli Vesterlund at the University of Umeå repeats many of the things we said about migration, the importance of following the migration and the impacts of this migration on sort of resource development and post-migration on communities. Also from the perspective of gender and indigenousness, those other variables, and so that's what he's interested in looking at.